Hello, welcome back to the Dusty Codex, and to all of our new subscribers, a special welcome to the front lines of history. We are thrilled you've joined our legion. Today, we are not just telling a story, we are staging a war. A war between two of the most powerful men of antiquity, circa 451 AD, for the very soul of Western Europe. Everyone knows the name Attila the Hun, the Scourge of God. The man who, it was said, grass never grew again where his horse had trod. He was the most feared man in the world. But few know the name of the man who stopped him. Flavius Aetius, the last of the Romans, a general of supreme cunning and desperate genius. This is the story of the Battle of Chalons, 451 AD. This was not a simple, clean fight of Romans versus Huns. It was a chaotic, desperate, world-ending brawl, a true clash of civilizations. On one side, Attila's empire of Huns, Ostrogoths, Gepids, and other subjects. On the other, Aetius's impossible, desperate coalition of Romans, Visigoths, Alans, and Franks, enemies who agreed to unite against a common doom. By 450 AD, Attila was the master of a vast, nomadic empire. He had subjugated dozens of tribes, including the Ostrogoths and Gepids, and had extorted hundreds of thousands of pounds of gold from the Eastern Roman Empire in Constantinople. In 451 AD, he turned his sights west on the wealthy but fragile provinces of Gaul, modern France. His pretext was flimsy, a political spat over a Roman princess, but his intent was clear: plunder, conquest, and the subjugation of the West. His army was a force of nature. Its core was the Hunnic heavy cavalry, peerless horsemen, masters of the composite bow, who could shower an enemy with arrows and vanish before a counterattack could be formed. But this was not just a horde. It was a sophisticated, multi-ethnic army, supported by his German subjects, the Ostrogoths, Gepids, and others, who provided the infantry and heavy cavalry that Attila needed to take cities. His invasion of Gaul was a brutal, terrifying success. Opposing him was the Western Roman Empire, a state in name only. The real power was not the weak, paranoid Emperor Valentinian III hiding in Ravenna, but the supreme general of the army, Flavius Aetius. Aetius was one of history's most fascinating figures. He was a brilliant general, a ruthless politician, and the only man alive who truly understood the Huns. Why? Because he had lived with them. As a young man, Aetius had been a political hostage, spending years living among the Huns. He learned their language, their culture, and their way of war. He had even been friends with Attila as a youth. He knew better than anyone what they were capable of. For 2 decades, Aetius had skillfully played the barbarian tribes against each other, using Hunnic mercenaries to fight his Gothic enemies and Gothic mercenaries to fight his Frankish enemies. He was the puppet master holding the West together. But in 451 AD, his old diplomatic games were over. Attila, his former friend and occasional ally, had become an existential threat. Aetius's small Roman army was not enough. To stop a monster, he would have to create a monster of his own. Aetius's only hope lay with the Visigoths, a powerful Germanic kingdom settled in southern Gaul, France. The problem? The Visigoths hated Aetius. He had spent the last 20 years fighting them. Aetius rode to the court of the Visigoth king, Theodoric I, and made the speech of his life. He argued that Attila was not a Roman problem, but a world problem, that after Attila was done with the Romans, his Hunnic horde would come for the Goths. Theodoric, an old, wise, and battle-hardened king, knew Aetius was right. In a world-changing moment, the Visigoths, the same people who had sacked Rome 40 years earlier, agreed to march with the Roman army as equals. This was the coalition. The disciplined Romans, the ferocious Visigoth heavy cavalry, and a volatile, unreliable contingent of Alans, another nomadic tribe, who Aetius placed, with great cunning, in the center of his line, between the Romans and Goths, where they could not flee. This is the moment, the Catalonian fields, 451 AD. It is, perhaps, the most diverse, chaotic, and terrifying battlefield in the history of the ancient world. Hun, Ostrogoth, Gepid, and Frank. Roman, Visigoth, and Alan. This is not a battle, it's a world war, fought in a single afternoon. The men on the field had no concept of saving Western civilization. They were fighting for their king, for their plunder, for their very lives, in a brutal, churning mass of violence. The fate of centuries, all hanging by a single bloody thread. If these stories, these chaotic, desperate pivot points where the entire future of the world is decided in a single day's brawl, are what you seek, I invite you to subscribe to the Dusty Codex. Your support allows us to stand on these battlefields of the past and ask, what if? The battle, fought on June 20th, 451 AD, began with a bad omen. Attila's own soothsayers warned him of disaster. Hesitant, he delayed his attack until the 9th hour, late in the afternoon, hoping darkness would cover his retreat if necessary. The battle's first crucial action was a race. A single, sloping ridge dominated the center of the field. Aetius, knowing its importance, dispatched his Roman and Visigoth forces to take it. Aetius's men won the race. They seized the high ground. This was a tactical disaster for Attila. His Huns, horsemen who relied on space and momentum, were now forced to charge uphill into a prepared line of spears and shields. Attila, seeing the battle turn against him, did what he did best. He led from the front. He gathered his personal guard and led a cataclysmic, desperate charge straight at the heart of the Visigoth line, hoping to break the coalition with one savage blow. In the chaotic, swirling brawl that followed, King Theodoric I, the aged Visigoth lion, was struck. He fell from his horse, some say by an Ostrogoth spear, others say by accident, and was lost in the chaos. According to the Gothic historian Jordanes, the king was trampled to death by his own cavalry, who were charging forward, oblivious that their leader was under their hooves. As the battle hung in the balance, word reached Theodoric's son, Thorismund. His father was dead. The news, which should have broken the Visigoth spirit, instead ignited it with a terrible primal fury. Seizing command, Thorismund led a revenge-fueled charge that was so ferocious it shattered the elite Hunnic cavalry. The Huns, who had been charging uphill, now broke and fled. This was the decisive moment. Attila's army, broken by the Gothic charge and pushed back by the Romans on the ridge, was routed. For the first time in his life, Attila the Hun was forced to retreat, fleeing for his life. Attila and the remnants of his army fled back to their camp, a massive fortress made of hundreds of wagons chained together, a laager. The coalition army surrounded them, and a tense, terrifying night began. Inside the laager, Attila, believing he was doomed, ordered a massive funeral pyre to be built from all the army's wooden saddles. He intended to be burned alive, along with his treasure, rather than suffer the humiliation of capture. As dawn broke, the victorious coalition debated. Thorismund and the Visigoths were screaming for blood. They wanted to storm the laager and exterminate the Huns, to avenge their king. But Aetius, the last Roman, played his final, brilliant, and treacherous card. He secretly persuaded Thorismund to rush back to his capital in Toulouse, warning him that his brothers might try to steal the Visigoth throne in his absence. Then, as the Visigoths marched south, Aetius did nothing. He held his own Roman army back and allowed Attila to escape. Aetius's logic was cold, Roman, and brilliant. A completely victorious Visigoth empire was a bigger threat to Rome than a weakened, humiliated Hunnic one. He needed Attila to keep the Goths in check. Attila would die 2 years later, his empire dissolving into chaos. The Battle of Chalons was not a clean, decisive victory, but a brutal, chaotic bloodletting that shattered the myth of Hunnic invincibility. It was the swan song of the Western Roman army and, in the alliance of Goths and Romans, the first messy, violent birth of a new medieval Europe.